So I recently did a series on the ASCEND studies. Most of the ASCEND study trial was for aspirin for primary prevention of cardiovascular disease with diabetics. There was a nested study on omega-3s. That's what this is going to be about today. Omega-3s, a follow-up on this. So it was, and we're going to talk about the Reduce It trial. Vascepa, whatever that stuff is. We'll talk about what the new stuff is that's out there. New England Journal of Medicine, effect of N3 fatty acid supplements in diabetes. And again, as many of you know, it's a sad situation for the omega-3 fans out there. They randomly assigned 15,480 patients with diabetes but without evidence of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease to receive 1 gram capsules containing either N3 fatty acids or matching placebo olive oil daily. Now wait a minute. 1 gram? Why 1 gram? That's a very low dose. And omega-3s. What about EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, or DHA? The more important components. It didn't delineate that. So again, more bad news in a visual format here. The red line is the people that were taking fatty acids. The black line is placebo, and the y-axis here is the patients with an event, the percentage. So as you can see, not significant in terms of changes. So this headline from the American Council on Science and Health actually is not new. It came from another study, but I think the information on the headline itself is very clear. Time to throw the fish oil back, and you look at the picture, throwing it back in the water with the fish. The first sentence, another one bites the dust, and I think it's helpful to read some of the text that goes along with this. At some point, perhaps dietary supplement fans are going to wonder why they spent so much money on a bunch of stuff which ended up being useless once properly evaluated in human trials. Now, that was April of 2018. That was before the ASCEND studies. That was actually in response to this study out of the JAMA network. This was in March of 2018, and it was a meta-analysis. Looked at 10 trials involving 78,000 individuals for associations of omega-3 fatty acid supplements with cardiovascular disease risk. They saw no association. So again, for the omega-3 fans, the news just keeps getting worse and worse, doesn't it? Well, until this week. As a response to my omega-3 video, DryView87 said, okay, now, a week or so later, you're going to have to comment on the Amarin drug, Vascepa. John gave some wise response, as he usually does. I believe you may be referring to the recently announced results of the Reduce It trial, where 4 grams of EPA was used in statin-treated people with hypertriglyceridemia, 150 to 499, who already had normal LDL levels. It showed a 25% reduction in cardiovascular events. Now, John's take is it's way too early to accept the results until the trials are analyzed by independent researchers. The trial design and methods need to be looked at closely with the results. You can always get non-prescription EPA over the counter. It's quite inexpensive compared to the rate of $2,400 per year for the patented Vascepa used in the trial. So again, some very, very good points. Now, what was going on, and what's this trial about? Well, this is the New York Times headline. Fish oil drug may reduce heart attack and stroke risks for some. Large doses of an omega-3 fatty acid in fish oil sharply reduce the rate of cardiovascular events in people with a history of heart disease or type 2 diabetes. Are you getting frustrated yet? Are you feeling whipsawed? It happens. And again, I think one of the things I would counsel all of us, I was taking fish oil supplements and eating salmon. Perhaps many people would criticize my practices. They criticize the type of salmon I eat. I tend to eat cheap salmon. I've seen all the videos about it. But I eat salmon more because I realized you just weren't getting enough, or I wasn't getting enough supplements from, or enough EPA from just taking supplements. These are huge pills, and you usually, again, need to get 3 grams. So, again, I wasn't surprised when the Ascend study showed no results. But let's get back to the new trial, the Vascepa Amarin Reduce-It trial. Now, this is interesting. This comes from Seeking Alpha. Seeking Alpha is some sort of stock, make a bunch of money real fast portfolio information. And here's their headline. Amarin, which is the company that makes Vascepa, reports positive results from Reduce-It study, and shares are up 307% pre-market. Well, now, why on earth? That's not usually what happens. Significant biomedical information is not usually announced. Is usually announced in a large medical convention or conference, or when the study is published itself. And quite often with these big ones like this, they'll publish it in the study at the same time that they announce it at a large conference. So, and in fact, I think that's what they did with the Ascend studies. Something happened here. I'm guessing the guys at Amarin were too excited about the results of this trial with a 25% lower risk cardiovascular events, and decided they were going to put it out there, whether the researchers wanted to wait or not. And what they're saying now is, look, we will announce it at the American Heart Association scientific sessions on November 10th. So we're really going to have to wait for another month to find out exactly what this is saying. Now, I was able to find something on a medical website, Medscape. It's what I use for quick and easy continuing medical education. The Reduce-It trial, 25% reduction in MACE, that's cardiovascular events, with high-dose EPA. As you get deeper into this, reading this, though, it's clear the Medscape article is simply covering information that was in that press release from Amarin. So again, we're getting our medical information from the company that makes the stuff and their own press release. And again, they predicted correctly with numbers like that, they're going to get a 307% increase in their stock. But it does give us some information. It talks about the entry criteria. The LDL levels were 41 to 100. So again, these people had low LDL. They had persistently elevated triglycerides, 150 to 499. Some folks would estimate that there are 60 to 70 million people in the United States that have those kind of high triglycerides. And I think these were people that already had a cardiovascular history, even outside of the high triglycerides. In fact, they did go in and they talked to someone else. They found their own expert, Christy Ballantyne at Baylor. And he said, it's important to understand the patient population enrolled in this study. 70% of these patients were secondary prevention. Yes, that's what I was saying a minute ago. They already had an event. And 30% were high-risk primary prevention. They had diabetes and at least one additional risk factor. And all patients had triglycerides over 150. So can't we get information on this trial? Are we going to have to wait 6 weeks? Actually, no. There are ways to get a little bit more information on it. But we'll cover that in just a minute. First, a brief introduction. And for those of you who are saying, gosh, the introduction's coming after a long time, this is going to be a long video. No, there's not that much left. My name is Ford Brewer, F-O-R-D, Brewer, B-R-E-W-E-R. Started off as an ER doc. Got very frustrated with the amount of preventable death, disease, and disability my patients brought into the ER. So I decided I was going to go into preventive medicine, even if it made a bureaucrat out of me, which it usually did 30 years ago when I did this. Johns Hopkins had a clinical prevention program. I went there. I went to Johns Hopkins, ended up loving it, running the program, and have basically been in a position of teaching docs and patients about primary prevention. I say teaching, as you can see on these videos, the field is developing quickly, and all of us have a lot to learn. So, what else have we got? Where can we get information on a study before it's published? Clinicaltrials.gov. And I'll put a link to this in the video write-up. And this is it. The study of AMR 101 to evaluate its ability to reduce cardiovascular events in high-risk patients with hypertriglyceridemia on statins. The primary objective is to evaluate the effect of 4 grams per day of AMR 101 for preventing the occurrence of a major cardiovascular event. Reduce it. So again, just go in and Google clinical trials and a couple of things about the name. I think I used Amarin, Reduce It, omega-3s, and clinical trials, and this is what I got. So what else does this tell us? Again, there's 3 or 4 page descriptions of the study. Here's the brief summary. AMR 101, icosapent ethyl EPA, is a highly purified ethyl ester of icosapentaenoic acid, EPA, being developed by Amarin Pharma Incorporated for the treatment of hypertriglyceridemia. The purpose of this study is to evaluate whether this drug, combined with a statin therapy, will be superior to statin therapy alone when used as a prevention in reducing long-term cardiovascular events in high-risk patients with mixed dyslipidemia. That means bad lipids, the increased triglycerides. So then you go to the study design, interventional or clinical trial, estimated enrollment. This is pre-study. This is what the government had to hear and logged in their government clinical trials database. 8,000 participants. So, and then they have the model, the trial, the title, etc. And there's a lot more interesting information there. So, again, it still doesn't answer the question about results. I was able to go in and find an article that was published regarding the study design. This was in Clinical Trials, Clinical Cardiology, 2017 in March, where they're talking about the study itself. I think maybe it had already been developed, approved, funded, and started. But basically, the title is Rationale and Design of REDUCE-IT, Reduction of Cardiovascular Events with Icosapent Ethyl Intervention Trial. Now, hold on just a second. Unfortunately, I have gotten lost because, okay, yep, here we go. I wanted to cover this. This is out of that article in Clinical Cardiology. And it basically gives a little bit of introduction and why they did what they were doing. Statin therapy has been a well-established cornerstone, yet despite this, people still get heart attacks. They still have events. Outcome studies of relative low doses of omega-3 in Japan, the JELIS trial, and Italy have suggested that it may provide some cardiovascular protection. However, these were performed in countries that are getting a lot more omega-3s, olive oil in Italy and fish in Japan. Again, relatively low doses. And again, just like so many of the other pieces of research, still really foggy about whether or not there's an impact. So, are we going to see a significant impact? I hope so. I'm still an omega-3 fan. So here's a couple of differences. Let me give you some information about the two studies and go back and compare them. This is bottom line it. I get a lot of grief for telling all the news but not giving any sort of bottom line and recommendation. Here's the ASCEND trial versus the REDUCE-IT trial. The ASCEND trial was patients with diabetes and no other risk factor. The REDUCE-IT trial was patients with diabetes with triglycerides greater than 150 and another significant risk factor. Again, 70% of them had already had an event. If you look at the studies, both of them had plenty of subjects to get plenty of power to define an event or a difference. 15,480 for ASCEND and 8,000 for REDUCE-IT. Obviously, both of these were multi-center trials. But here's two of the key differences. 1 gram in the ASCEND trial versus 4 grams in REDUCE-IT. And they just said omega-3, no EPA or DHA percentage even listed for ASCEND, whereas REDUCE-IT showed concentrated EPA. Now, here's the other thing. Again, in terms of bottom line it, so what does all this mean? The jury's still out on what we see with the REDUCE-IT trial. I, however, don't think that you're going to see what we've seen so far without it being very, very positive for EPA, at least, icosapentaenoic acid. When I've taken supplements, and I've always, again, one of the problems with supplements is they often don't clarify the EPA and DHA. That's what you really need. And again, I'm guessing from the signals we're seeing in this study, the REDUCE-IT study, that the preference for EPA probably was correct, and possibly DHA as well. So, what am I doing? Again, what does this mean? Omega-3 is not dead yet. You omega-3 lovers, don't give up the ship at this point. Don't throw the fish back in the water. And again, EPA is probably the more important part of it, if it is going to be a big issue. What am I doing? I'm still eating my salmon, and I may go back now and add a supplement. But when we talk about eating salmon and adding a supplement, I have to tell you, pardon the pun, but that's a whole new kettle of fish. I go cheap, so I get the cheapest kind of salmon, and John and others would criticize my source for salmon. I've seen all of the information about and videos about salmon farming. I understand that. And I've read some stuff on salmon fish oil supplementation. There's a lot to that, and quality as well. So I'm going to have to leave that one to viewers to help me out. How do we get the best supplementation? How do we get omega-3s in there? How do we get the best salmon? And do all of this, or halibut, and do all of this without breaking the bank. At the end of the day, or the end of the video, I just want to say thank you if you're still here. Thank you for your interest.